The Galactic Council's grand hall stretched endlessly, a gleaming structure of polished metal and floating lights. Delegates from countless star systems had gathered here, each representing their home worlds with pride and authority. The air was thick with quiet anticipation, and the hall buzzed with soft murmurs, the shuffling of robes and the faint hum of hovering platforms. Everyone expected the day to proceed as usual, with debates, proposals, and polite disagreements. Yet beneath the calm surface, a subtle tension ran through the room, almost invisible but impossible to ignore. Now, among all the representatives, the humans were unusual in their demeanor. They did not rush to claim attention, nor did they dominate discussions with long speeches or extravagant displays. They arrived quietly, their posture calm but firm, their faces thoughtful. While other species seemed eager to assert dominance or showcase their technological marvels, humans chose a different approach: observation. Their eyes scanned the room carefully, taking in every gesture, every whisper, every flicker of tension. From the moment they entered, it was clear to anyone paying attention that something had changed. The humans were not simply here to participate. They were here to make a point, though they had not yet spoken it aloud. Their silence spoke louder than words. Other delegates noticed it, some with curiosity, others with unease. A few whispered behind their hands, speculating whether this quiet behavior was a sign of confidence or something more dangerous. But none could predict the impact it would have. The day began with routine formalities, greetings exchanged, protocols observed, and announcements read. Yet even as the council moved through its usual motions, small signs of human discontent became apparent. They questioned minor points, requested clarifications that seemed unnecessary, and carefully avoided endorsing the council's standard resolutions. At first, the other delegates assumed it was merely a temporary mood, a minor protest against a single issue. But as the morning progressed, the subtle resistance became harder to ignore. Some council members tried to engage the humans directly, asking questions and seeking reassurance that all was well. The humans answered politely but briefly, never revealing more than they needed to. Their words were measured, deliberate, and firm, giving no hint of emotion beyond quiet determination. It was almost as if they were holding back, waiting for the right moment to show that their patience had limits. Outside the council chamber, the humans' homeworld had been quietly preparing for this moment. Citizens watched news feeds and updates, discussing in hushed tones the reasons behind their leader's unusual approach. Unlike other species that often reacted with panic or grand gestures, humans relied on calm planning and collective focus. Communities came together, reinforcing their understanding that their leaders were not acting out of anger or fear, but from a sense of principle. Back in the hall, the alien delegates continued their performances of diplomacy, unaware that the humans were already reshaping the rules of engagement. Some attempted to charm the humans with offers of trade, technology, and influence, assuming that flattery and promises could sway them. Others tried intimidation, reminding the humans of the military and strategic strength of the council. Yet the humans remained composed, neither flustered nor impressed. Their silence and careful observation were not signs of weakness. They were tools of strategy, a quiet reminder that they would act on their own terms. The tension slowly began to ripple across the council. Smaller species, less confident in their own influence, started whispering among themselves, speculating about what the humans might do next. Even the most experienced delegates found themselves uncertain, realizing that the humans were unpredictable in the best sense of the word. They did not follow the usual patterns, and that unpredictability created unease. No one could dismiss them, and no one could assume that familiar tactics would work. As the session continued, it became clear that this was more than a minor disagreement. The humans' presence alone was making the council rethink its assumptions. They were not loud or aggressive, but their deliberate calm was powerful. By simply refusing to play by expected rules, they had shifted the balance of attention. Every gesture, every word, every pause was being scrutinized. The council had faced many challenges over the millennia, but few had shown this level of quiet authority without resorting to threats or displays of force. By the end of the morning, a subtle but unmistakable current of tension had filled the hall. Delegates no longer spoke freely among themselves, their eyes often flicking toward the human representatives. They sensed that something significant was brewing, though no one yet knew its full scope. The humans, meanwhile, remained composed, calm, and focused, confident in the knowledge that their actions, however understated, were already influencing the council in ways others could not yet measure. It was a day that began like any other, with the usual protocols and ceremonies, but it would end differently. The humans' quiet determination had set the stage for events that would challenge the council's expectations and shake the galaxy's assumptions about diplomacy, power, and respect. In this moment, before a single declaration had been made, the seeds of change were already sown, and no one present could say where the story would lead. After the initial session in the council hall, the murmurs of curiosity quickly turned into uneasy whispers of concern. Reports began trickling in from across the galaxy, small actions by humans that seemed minor at first, but hinted at a deeper dissatisfaction. One report described the sudden suspension of a joint research project on energy technology. Another noted that council observers who had recently visited Earth were being recalled, with no explanation beyond a brief statement emphasizing human autonomy. At first, many council members brushed off these incidents as procedural adjustments, thinking they were temporary or symbolic. But the pattern was growing too consistent to ignore. Back on Earth, the humans were quietly observing the reactions of the council. Their leaders had not acted impulsively. Every decision, every withdrawal of participation had been carefully calculated. Citizens followed the updates closely, discussing the implications in homes, workplaces, and public forums. Unlike many other societies, where news of political tension could spark panic or outrage, humans responded with thoughtful discussion. They considered both immediate effects and long-term consequences. Their focus was on principles and fairness, not retaliation or spectacle. Within the council, unease began to spread. The alien representatives had long relied on a predictable rhythm: negotiations, debates, minor compromises, and symbolic gestures. Humans disrupted that rhythm simply by refusing to play along in expected ways. Delegates who had previously considered human behavior easy to manage now began doubting themselves. Some whispered in quiet corners, speculating about what humanity might do next. Others openly debated strategies, trying to anticipate human moves. Yet every prediction felt uncertain. The humans themselves remained calm but vigilant. They had not announced any ultimatums or threats. Instead, they maintained a steady, deliberate approach. Their decisions, whether to pause collaboration, restrict access, or withhold certain information, were presented politely and professionally. There was no anger, no drama, and no escalation. The restraint was deliberate. Humans understood that true influence did not require shouting or displays of force. It came from clarity, consistency, and unwavering adherence to principles. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of human discontent were beginning to reach smaller species that relied heavily on council decisions. Some of these worlds depended on technology shared through council initiatives or on agreements that humans had helped to negotiate. When news arrived that humans were pulling back from certain projects, these species grew concerned. Meetings were called, and debates began over how to respond. The galaxy had never seen humans act in this quiet, resolute manner, and the unfamiliarity bred both confusion and apprehension. Within the council chamber, sessions grew tenser. Delegates became more cautious in their speech, often pausing mid-sentence to consider how humans might react. Attempts to engage the humans directly were met with polite but firm answers that revealed little beyond what the humans were willing to disclose. Some delegates tried flattery, presenting extravagant offers or praising human ingenuity, hoping to coax cooperation. Others resorted to subtle intimidation, reminding humans of their shared responsibilities or implying the potential consequences of non-cooperation. But humans responded the same way they always had: calm, measured, and unwavering. Over time, the council began to notice a pattern. Humans did not act out of fear or anger, but out of deliberate principle. Every withdrawal, every pause, every careful statement was designed to make a single point. The humans expected respect and fairness, and they were willing to wait until the council demonstrated it. This realization unsettled many delegates. They had never faced a society that refused to be pressured or manipulated, a society that could influence an entire interstellar council simply by standing firm. Back on Earth, citizens were acutely aware of the council's growing anxiety. Leaders communicated openly about the importance of maintaining calm, observing the council's reactions, and ensuring that every action aligned with humanity's long-term interests. Schools, universities, workplaces, and local communities participated in discussions about the ongoing situation. Citizens understood that patience and unity were their greatest strengths. Unlike other species that might react impulsively to perceived slights, humans trusted in careful planning and collective decision, making dot as days turned into weeks. The council grew increasingly restless. Delegates began sending envoys to Earth, hoping for informal discussions that might clarify human intentions. Each envoy returned with little more than confirmation of the humans' careful observation and principled patience. Attempts to predict human actions became a central topic of discussion, leading to long debates and occasional conflict among council members themselves. Some factions advocated for compromise and concessions, fearing the consequences of prolonged human disengagement. Others warned against giving humans too much influence, worried that yielding might embolden them further. Meanwhile, humans continued their work quietly but efficiently. Research, communication, and societal projects progressed at a steady pace. Leaders met regularly to assess the council's reactions, ensuring that each decision reinforced the principles they stood for. The humans' calm consistency sent a message that was impossible to ignore. Their actions were deliberate, thoughtful, and grounded in values. Not panic or reaction. The tension reached a tipping point when smaller member species began lobbying within the council, emphasizing the importance of regaining human participation. Discussions in the council hall became more urgent, with delegates arguing over strategies, offers, and potential compromises. Every voice, every argument, and every plan reflected a growing awareness. The humans were no longer just participants in the council. They had become a force that the entire galaxy had to reckon with. In the midst of this growing uncertainty, humans remained composed. Their silence and careful observance had achieved what no threats, bribes, or intimidation could. They had shifted the balance of power without aggression, without spectacle, and without fear. While the council scrambled to respond, humans quietly strengthened their society, reinforcing the belief that unity, patience, and principles could reshape interstellar relationships. By the end of this period, it was clear that the humans' actions had changed the galaxy's perception of them. They were no longer seen as a species that could be easily swayed, negotiated around, or pressured. Their quiet, principled withdrawal had introduced a new reality. Patience, strategy, and unwavering adherence to values could command respect even in the vast, complex structures of galactic governance. The tension that had been quietly building finally reached a breaking point. In a grand council session, humans formally addressed the assembly, their voices calm yet firm, carrying weight in every word. There were no dramatic displays, no threats, no loud accusations. Every gesture was controlled, deliberate, and composed. Yet the effect on the council was immediate and electric. Whispers stopped. Heads turned. Even the most confident delegates could feel a subtle shiver of unease run through the room. Humans announced that they would be withdrawing from all ongoing negotiations. They would no longer participate in projects, discussions, or committees until their concerns were properly acknowledged and addressed. It was not a decision born from anger or fear. Instead, it was a statement of principle. They demanded fairness, respect, and recognition. Their withdrawal was precise and methodical, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Every word was carefully chosen to make the council understand that this was not temporary frustration. It was a deliberate pause to assert their autonomy. The hall erupted with murmurs. Some delegates tried to challenge the announcement immediately, suggesting that humans reconsider, offering concessions, or even hinting at consequences. But the humans remained calm, answering questions politely but firmly. They emphasized that this step was necessary to maintain trust and respect. They were not abandoning diplomacy. They were redefining it. Their reasoning was clear. Partnerships must be built on mutual respect, not pressure, intimidation, or empty promises. The immediate effect on the council was chaos disguised as polite discussion. Delegates began whispering frantically, exchanging nervous glances, and debating what actions to take. Some saw the withdrawal as a minor disruption, assuming humans would return quickly under pressure. Others recognized the deeper significance, realizing that humans were demonstrating a power that could not be challenged by force or persuasion alone. A ripple of panic began spreading, subtle at first, but undeniable. Within the council chambers, factions formed quickly. One group argued for immediate negotiation, offering concessions and hoping to entice humans back into the fold. They feared the collapse of trade agreements, the loss of shared knowledge, and the potential destabilization of regions that relied on human cooperation. Another group resisted, wary of appearing weak or conceding to pressure. They debated whether to isolate humans or attempt to force compliance through indirect measures. Every strategy was discussed, every possibility weighed, yet no solution seemed certain. Humans had introduced a variable that the council could not predict. Across the galaxy, the effects of the withdrawal began to show. Joint projects stalled immediately. Trade routes that had relied on human technology faced delays. Research initiatives that had counted on human expertise found themselves struggling. Smaller species, which depended on these projects for survival or growth, grew anxious. Many turned to their council representatives, demanding swift action, while others tried to establish independent communication with humans. The sense of unease spread like a ripple through countless star systems. Humans, meanwhile, continued their work quietly at home. There was no panic, no sudden announcements of aggression, no attempts to exploit the situation. Instead, life went on with careful precision. Leaders held regular meetings, assessing the council's reactions and ensuring that each step reflected the principles they valued: fairness, respect, and self-reliance. Citizens engaged in thoughtful discussions, reinforcing the importance of patience and unity. Communities worked together to support these decisions, recognizing that the calm strength of their society was their greatest tool. The council tried again to communicate indirectly, sending envoys and messages to probe human intentions. Every attempt returned with the same measured response. Humans would engage, but only on their terms. Delegates realized that any attempt to manipulate, intimidate, or coerce would fail. For the first time in its long history, the council faced a society that refused to bend under pressure. The realization unsettled even the most seasoned leaders in the hall. Tension grew with every passing day. Ordinary discussions became strained, and the subtle undercurrents of panic became more visible. Council members who had previously ignored human concerns were now forced to reconsider every decision. Meetings that once flowed smoothly now ended with long, anxious silences. The humans' methodical withdrawal had exposed weaknesses in the Council's structure: overconfidence, underestimation of new players, and reliance on predictable behavior. Despite the rising panic, humans remained composed. Their strength was quiet, grounded in strategy and values. Every day of withdrawal reinforced a simple truth: respect and fairness could not be demanded. They had to be earned through deliberate, principled action. While the galaxy flailed in uncertainty, humans quietly demonstrated that patience and moral clarity could shape the behavior of even the most powerful institutions. As the weeks passed, it became clear that the Council's panic was not just about stalled projects or lost influence. It was about perception, authority, and the realization that a single species, by acting with integrity and resolve, could change the dynamics of power across the galaxy. Humans had made no threats, yet their presence or absence dominated every discussion. The Council now faced a challenge far more difficult than any military threat. It had to reckon with a species that demanded fairness and refused to compromise on its principles. For humans, the withdrawal was not a punishment. It was a statement, a demonstration that respect and equity were non-negotiable. Citizens, leaders, and communities understood that true influence came from consistent, principled action, not from fear or intimidation. They had proven that a society grounded in patience, reason, and self-respect could shift the behavior of even the most powerful interstellar body. The Council, meanwhile, was forced into introspection. Leaders began questioning past decisions, reconsidering long-held assumptions about humanity. The whispers of panic had grown into open debates about strategy, policy, and respect. Delegates realized that underestimating humans had been a grave mistake. Every stalled project, every delayed negotiation, and every uncertain outcome now reminded them that human patience was not weakness. It was power. By the end of this stage, the humans' withdrawal had fundamentally changed the Council's perception. They were no longer simply one among many species. They had become a force that demanded recognition. The calm and deliberate actions of a society that valued principle over expedience had reshaped interstellar diplomacy in ways that words, threats, or displays of power could not achieve. Humans had shown that restraint, clarity, and unwavering adherence to values could create influence far stronger than any military fleet or technological marvel. The Council had never experienced anything quite like this. Delegates moved quickly through the corridors, their usual composure replaced by tension and urgency. Messages flew back and forth at an unprecedented pace. Every representative, from the smallest planetary system to the most powerful sector, felt the shockwaves of humanity's withdrawal. Plans that had once seemed routine now appeared fragile. Agreements once taken for granted were suddenly at risk. The Council had underestimated the humans, and now they scrambled to respond. Emergency sessions were called. Council chambers, usually orderly and formal, were now filled with heated debates and anxious voices. Leaders argued about what actions could be taken, but every plan met a new problem. Coercion seemed impossible because humans had made it clear they would not be intimidated. Offers of concessions were tricky, as they risked signaling weakness or encouraging further withdrawal. Some delegates suggested sending fleets or enforcing trade restrictions, but others quickly pointed out that humans had anticipated every such move and prepared for them with careful planning and self-sufficiency. Humans themselves did not act hastily. Back on Earth, life continued as usual, but behind the scenes, leaders observed the Council carefully. Citizens were aware of the growing panic, but there was no chaos or fear. Schools, workplaces, and communities discussed the developments calmly, always emphasizing unity and patience. Humans had learned over generations that measured action not reactive emotion, produced real results. They had already proven that even the most powerful institutions could be influenced through steady, principled decision-making. In the council, anxiety spread like wildfire. Delegates who had previously assumed humanity would bend to pressure now realized they had misjudged their opponents entirely. Meetings were interrupted with urgent questions. Strategies were revised multiple times a day, and even experienced council leaders began doubting the effectiveness of their usual tactics. Every communication from humans, no matter how polite or restrained, seemed to carry an unspoken message. We are patient, we are strong, and we will not compromise our principles. Some factions within the council tried to create a sense of unity against the humans. Plans were drawn to isolate Earth diplomatically, to pressure other species into limiting trade and cooperation with humans, and to push for quick resolutions. But each attempt revealed a flaw in their assumptions. Humans were not reliant on any single council structure. They had diversified strategies, alliances, and independent capabilities. Each effort to manipulate or corner them failed quietly but decisively, reinforcing the humans' strategic advantage. The council's panic became more evident as weeks passed. Delegates began overanalyzing every minor human action, searching for hidden meaning where there was none. A delayed response to a message sparked hours of debate. A new policy enacted by humans was dissected from every angle. The council realized that humans were playing a subtle, deliberate game that no one could rush or disrupt. Their calm confidence was a form of power the galaxy had rarely seen. At the same time, the withdrawal was sending ripples across the stars. Trade that had relied on human innovation slowed to a trickle. Scientific projects that had counted on human expertise stalled. Smaller species that had relied on humans for technical support, educational exchange, or cultural guidance began to worry. Some worlds attempted to fill the gap with their own initiatives, but most quickly recognized the humans' unique capability and influence. The absence of humans made the galaxy realize how much had been taken for granted. Humans, however, remained focused on their own priorities. They were not seeking revenge or dominance. They were ensuring their own autonomy and reinforcing the principle that fairness could not be ignored. Leaders met regularly to assess council reactions, planning their next steps carefully. Citizens engaged in constructive projects at home, strengthening communities, supporting education, and ensuring the society's resilience. Every action reinforced the message. Humans were not reactive, they were deliberate. They had chosen their path with care, and they would remain steady no matter the pressure. Within the council, the panic became a mix of frustration and admiration. Leaders recognized that humans had introduced a new dynamic to interstellar diplomacy. They did not rely on force, intimidation, or flamboyant displays to command attention. Instead, they relied on patience, consistency, and moral clarity. This made them unpredictable to a system built on manipulation, alliances, and strategic posturing. Humans had made it clear, respect could not be demanded, it could only be earned. Attempts to communicate directly with humans had little effect. Envoys returned with reports describing a society that was calm, organized, and fully aware of the council's desperation. Every reply from human leaders emphasized clarity, fairness, and patience. There was no anger, no panic, no overreaction, only the quiet insistence that principles mattered above all else. The council could not rush them, intimidate them, or force them into decisions. Humans had created a situation in which time itself favored their strategy. The ripple effect continued to grow. Systems that had been part of collaborative council projects were forced to reconsider their reliance on humans. Some worlds sent messages to Earth seeking clarification, while others attempted to negotiate independently. Each contact reinforced the impression that humans would act only when their terms were respected. Across the galaxy, the lesson became clear. Humanity was not just another member of the Council. They were a force capable of reshaping agreements, challenging old hierarchies, and altering interstellar norms through deliberate, measured action. Meanwhile, humans continued to strengthen their society. Communities were more connected, governance more transparent, and citizens more involved. Every individual understood that patience, unity, and principle were their greatest assets. While the Council panicked and debated endlessly, humans demonstrated that calm intelligence, thoughtful planning, and steadfast adherence to values could wield more influence than fleets, weapons, or political pressure. By the end of this period, the Council was forced into a reluctant acknowledgement. They had underestimated humanity. What had seemed like silence or passive withdrawal was actually strategic influence in its most subtle form. Leaders debated how to respond, but every option was constrained by the humans' unwavering principles. It was a crisis unlike any other. No aggression, no force, no threats could alter the situation. Humanity had created a new paradigm for diplomacy, one that valued respect, patience, and integrity above all. Even as panic spread, humans maintained their composure. They continued observing, planning, and acting with purpose, reminding the galaxy that true strength came not from panic, manipulation, or coercion, but from clarity, consistency, and moral resolve. The Council, for the first time in its history, realized that patience could be as powerful as fleets and alliances. Humanity had quietly shifted the balance of power, demonstrating that influence did not always come from domination. It could come from principled, deliberate action that refused to yield to pressure. By the close of this chapter, the Council was left with no choice but to reconsider its assumptions. They had underestimated the humans, misjudged their patience, and failed to recognize the strength of a society guided by values rather than fear. The galaxy had changed, and humans had demonstrated that calm, deliberate, and principled action could challenge the expectations of even the most powerful institutions. The effects of humanity's withdrawal were now impossible to ignore. Across the galaxy, every system that had relied on human expertise, technology, or leadership began feeling the absence. Trade routes that once flowed smoothly faced delays. Scientific projects stalled without human participation. Educational exchanges and cultural programs paused, leaving gaps that no other species could easily fill. Smaller civilizations, in particular, began to realize just how integral humans had become to interstellar cooperation. Their absence sent a clear message. Humans were not just participants, they were a vital force. Within the Council, anxiety deepened. Delegates had long relied on humans to mediate, innovate, and maintain balance in delicate agreements. Without their input, negotiations slowed to a crawl. Deadlines were missed, and previously smooth processes now became battlegrounds of indecision. Every leader in the Council felt the pressure. Some tried to offer concessions or new incentives to lure humans back, but humans responded with polite reminders. They would return only when treated with fairness and respect. No promises, no negotiations under duress-only principle. The ripple effect reached even further. Independent colonies and smaller star systems began reassessing their own strategies. Some had depended on humans for trade, knowledge, and defense. Others had relied on Council decisions that humans helped enforce or guide. With humans temporarily stepping back, these systems faced uncertainty. They scrambled to find alternative arrangements, but few could match humanity's reliability, innovation, and careful planning. Slowly, a realization spread across the galaxy. Humans were more than a single member of the Council. They were a force that shaped stability, progress, and cooperation itself. Meanwhile, humans continued their work at home, quietly strengthening their society. Life went on as usual, but there was a heightened sense of purpose. Communities came together to support one another, knowing that their leaders' decisions were being closely observed across the stars. Citizens focused on education, innovation, and communication, ensuring that every part of society reflected the principles that guided the withdrawal. Their unity, calm, and dedication to shared values created a strength that no one could easily challenge. Back in the council, panic became more visible. Delegates spoke openly about their worries, sometimes in hushed tones, sometimes in public debates. They realized that this was no ordinary disruption. Humanity's withdrawal was a deliberate exercise of influence, a demonstration that principled action could affect even the most entrenched interstellar structures. Council leaders began to question past assumptions. They had underestimated humans, assuming that threats, incentives, or authority could bend them to the Council's will. Now, they faced a reality they could not easily control. Smaller factions within the Council debated possible responses. Some suggested attempting to isolate humanity diplomatically, hoping to reduce their influence. Others argued for direct negotiation, proposing concessions and reassurances. A few even considered more aggressive strategies, though most quickly recognized that such attempts would fail. Humanity's careful planning and resilience meant that no threats, no bribes, and no manipulations could achieve what patience, principle, and consistency already had. Every approach was met with uncertainty, and every delay further demonstrated the humans' quiet power. Outside the Council, systems began adapting to the new reality. Independent research efforts sprouted to replace projects humans had paused, but progress was slower and less effective. Trade networks struggled to adjust. Political systems faced questions from citizens and stakeholders alike. How could they function effectively without humans? Every pause highlighted humanity's unique contributions. Yet even as other species struggled, humans remained focused not on disruption or revenge, but on maintaining their own stability and principles. Their actions were never intended to punish. They were meant to demonstrate that fairness and respect could not be ignored at the Council, growing more desperate by the day. Sent more envoys to Earth. Every envoy returned with the same message. Humans were steady, patient, and principled. There was no anger, no rash decision-making, no sense of panic. Humans would continue their withdrawal until the Council recognized their concerns and acted with fairness. This calm, deliberate stance frustrated Council leaders. They had faced countless crises before, but never one in which patience, strategy, and principle were the tools of influence. The humans were reshaping diplomacy without raising a single weapon or making a single threat. Within human society, citizens understood the significance of their leaders' actions. They supported the withdrawal not as an act of defiance, but as an expression of values that had guided their civilization for generations. Unity, patience, and principle became the cornerstones of everyday life. People engaged in constructive projects, knowing that each effort, no matter how small, reinforced the strength of their society and the legitimacy of their leaders' decisions. This calm strength contrasted sharply with the Council's growing panic, highlighting the difference between reactionary fear and thoughtful determination. As time went on, the galaxy began to see a profound truth. Human influence did not rely on aggression, intimidation, or spectacle. It relied on careful planning, clear principles, and unwavering consistency. The absence of humans from Council activities revealed just how integral their presence had been. The galaxy was learning that true power could emerge quietly through patience, integrity, and the courage to stand firm in one's values. By the end of this period, even the most skeptical Council members had to acknowledge the humans' unique position. Their withdrawal had not been disruptive for the sake of chaos. It had been deliberate, principled, and strategic. It forced reflection, inspired adaptation, and reshaped assumptions about leadership, influence, and cooperation. The humans had demonstrated that calm intelligence, unity, and patience could achieve far more than panic, threats, or manipulation ever could. For humans, the withdrawal was not about victory or dominance. It was about reinforcing a fundamental truth. Respect must be earned, and fairness cannot be ignored. Their society continued to thrive quietly, demonstrating that strength is often found in composure, integrity, and thoughtful action. Across the galaxy, observers began to see humanity not as just another member of the Council, but as a force capable of shaping interstellar outcomes through principle and patience alone. By the close of this stage, the ripple effects were undeniable. The Council's panic had intensified, smaller species were reassessing alliances, and the galaxy as a whole had begun to recognize the quiet power of humanity. The withdrawal had transformed ordinary diplomacy into a lesson in restraint, strategy, and moral clarity. Humans had proven that a society guided by unity, patience, and principle could influence even the most powerful institutions without raising a hand in aggression or issuing a single threat. Time passed slowly, but deliberately, as the humans continued their withdrawal from Council affairs. Their absence had already left a deep impression across the galaxy, and the Council could no longer ignore the consequences of their actions. Every day that humans refrained from participation, the effects became more obvious: stalled projects, delayed agreements, and a rising awareness that humans were not just another member of the Council, they were a force that demanded recognition. Inside the Council chambers, tension had become almost unbearable. Delegates argued about what to do next. Some called for more concessions to persuade humans to return, while others debated whether the Council should simply wait and hope humanity would rejoin on its own. Meetings were longer, discussions more heated, and no plan seemed sufficient to resolve the growing uncertainty. Every move was scrutinized, every decision second-guessed, because humans had proven that they could not be rushed, coerced, or manipulated. The Council realized that the traditional methods of diplomacy, threats, rewards, and persuasion were ineffective against a society guided by principle. Meanwhile, on Earth, humans continued to live and work as they always had. Their leaders monitored the Council's reactions carefully, but there was no panic. Citizens remained calm, knowing that patience and unity were their greatest strengths. Schools, workplaces, and local communities focused on supporting one another, reinforcing the sense of shared responsibility and collective purpose. The society thrived not through force or drama, but through steady, deliberate action. Every effort, no matter how small, strengthened the foundation of human influence and highlighted the contrast with the frantic energy of the Council. The ripple effects of human withdrawal had now spread across the galaxy. Trade networks adjusted slowly to new realities. Scientific projects waited for human guidance, and smaller civilizations began to reconsider their dependencies. It was clear that humans were indispensable in ways many had not realized before. Their absence had revealed the depth of their contributions, not through direct confrontation, but through a quiet, undeniable influence. Humanity's strength lay not in weapons, fleets, or coercion, but in principle, consistency, and intelligence. A Council, after weeks of intense debate and mounting pressure, finally began to reflect on its own shortcomings. Leaders admitted that past assumptions had been flawed. They had underestimated human patience, resilience, and the ability to act strategically without aggression. They recognized that previous efforts to sway or control humans had been short-sighted, and that the withdrawal was a natural consequence of ignoring fairness and respect. The Council now understood a profound truth. Influence and authority were meaningless if they lacked integrity and equity. At the same time, humans did not act out of vengeance or superiority. Their withdrawal was always principled, measured, and deliberate. Citizens and leaders alike emphasized that their goal was not to punish, but to demonstrate the value of fairness, respect, and consistency. Communities engaged in thoughtful discussion and constructive projects, ensuring that society remained strong while the Council grappled with its own uncertainty. The contrast between human composure and the Council's panic only strengthened the lesson that patience, intelligence, and principle were far more powerful than aggression or coercion. Slowly, the Council began to reach out again, this time with genuine acknowledgement of the humans' concerns. Messages were sent, proposals were carefully worded, and delegates approached with humility rather than authority. Humans responded cautiously, making it clear that dialogue would resume only under terms that respected their autonomy and values. They were willing to reopen talks, but on their own principles, at their own pace, and with fairness as the foundation. It was a subtle but unmistakable shift. Humans were no longer participants who could be pressured. They were equal partners whose respect must be earned. Across the galaxy, the ripple effects continued. Smaller systems that had once underestimated humans now recognized their value. Trade, science, and diplomacy began to adapt to a world where human influence was deliberate, principled, and unyielding. Observers took note. The most powerful force in this story was not military might or technological superiority, but patience, clarity, and adherence to values. Humanity had proven that calm intelligence and principled action could reshape even the most complex institutions. Back on Earth, life returned to a steady rhythm, though now with a heightened sense of purpose. Citizens and leaders alike understood the significance of their society's actions. They had reshaped interstellar diplomacy, not through conflict, but through example. Communities worked together, reinforcing the principles that had guided their leaders. Every project, every conversation, and every act of cooperation strengthened the society's moral and strategic position. The withdrawal had not been an act of defiance. It had been a lesson, quietly and firmly delivered to the galaxy. Eventually, the Council came to a cautious understanding. Humanity would rejoin discussions, but only on terms that recognized their autonomy and principles. Delegates approached negotiations with respect, acknowledging the mistakes of the past and the lessons they had learned. The humans, calm as ever, accepted dialogue but remained vigilant, ensuring that fairness and integrity guided every interaction. The galaxy had learned that influence could not be forced, that authority without respect was fragile, and that patience and principle could achieve far more than coercion ever could. By the end of this stage, a new balance had been established. The Council was wiser, more reflective, and better prepared to engage with humanity as a respected partner. Humans had achieved their goal not through conflict, but through steadfastness, clarity, and adherence to values. The story of withdrawal and reflection became a lesson across civilizations. Respect, fairness, and patience were more powerful than panic, threats, or manipulation. Humanity's withdrawal had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of power. It was no longer about who had the largest fleets, the most advanced technology, or the loudest voice. True strength came from unity, integrity, and the courage to stand by principles even in the face of uncertainty. The Council had learned this lesson, and humans had proven it not with aggression, but with calm, deliberate action that spoke louder than words. In the end, the galaxy had changed. Humanity had emerged stronger, the Council wiser, and all systems more aware of the importance of fairness, respect, and principle. The withdrawal had been a challenge, a test of patience and understanding, but it had also been a demonstration of what a society guided by values could achieve. Dialogue resumed, but the lesson remained. Influence built on integrity, patience, and clarity is lasting, powerful, and respected across the stars.